This is the Brave New Coin Crypto Conversation, hosted by Andy Pickering.
Hi everyone, Andy Pickering here. I'm your host and welcome to the Crypto Conversation, a Brave New Coin podcast where we talk to the people building the future in the Bitcoin, blockchain and cryptocurrency space. My guest today is Adrian Brink. Adrian is the founder of Anoma, a blockchain protocol that enables private asset-agnostic cash and private bartering. And I believe that Adrian founded Anoma to fight surveillance capitalism and the over-concentration of power in fiat currency. And he hopes to do this by protecting individuals' privacy through zero-knowledge technology. Welcome to the show, Adrian.
Glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
All right. Hey, glad to have you here, my man. What's going on? I'd love to hear a little bit about who you are, your background, where you are in the world. What's going on?
Yeah, I can sort of give you a quick introduction to myself and how I got into the space and sort of the steps that led to Anoma, because it's quite a bit. So I originally got into the space in like 2016. Because I was writing my graduate thesis on secure e-voting on Ethereum at the time, because Ethereum was the only sort of decentralized computational platform that was available in 2016. And this was at the time of the Arab Spring and the Catalan independence referendum in Europe. And so I thought it'd be a neat idea if we can have voting systems that are run independently of central governments. Because European ID cards tend to have RSA keys embedded in them so that you can map them to like on-chain keys. And so I wrote my thesis on secure e-voting using ID cards in order to sort of allow the Catalans to secede and hold a referendum, irrespective of whether the central government of Spain wanted that or not. That was sort of the earliest foray into Ethereum. And through this, I came across consensus mechanisms, ended up diving deep into things like Tenement, BFT, joined Cosmos as a third core protocol engineer, built up that entire stack. That's also where I met my two current co-founders. We ended up building one of the very first proof of stake companies in the world called Cryptium Labs, which we ended up selling in January of 2021. I think at the peak, we probably had $500 million under management or so. And this was really like, people should remember, like when we did this, it was very unclear whether proof of stake would ever work. It was like 2017, 2018, proof of stake was like, this will never work. It was like very unclear. Like looking back, like nowadays, it seems very obvious that proof of stake was going to be a thing. But back in 2018, it really wasn't. So we tried that out. That was quite nice. And then we started building up a dev team, did a bunch of core protocol development, Tezos, shipped all the major first protocol upgrades there. And then in January 2021, we sort of sat down and was like, what do we want to get out of the space? And honestly, it's not a smart contract platform. There can be some, but all the existing smart contract platforms, whether this is Ethereum or whether this is Solana or Near, they sort of all follow the very similar model. Like they are sort of a slightly better instantiation of a smart contract platform, but they don't allow people to build like very novel applications because they fundamentally have the same underlying architecture. And so with Anoma, we set out to provide a completely novel architecture that allows applications to be built that aren't currently being possible to be built. And at the same time, roll a bunch of the privacy features into the base layer protocol, because fundamentally, I don't think the space will ever get like mass adoption if we aren't privacy preserving, for the simple reason that no one will actually want this if your neighbors can see exactly what you're spending your money on, how much you're making every month. And the fact that like North Korea, if we moved global finance to Ethereum tomorrow, North Korea would be running the same kind of surveillance models that the NSA currently runs. And anyone with a computer can do this. So like, I just don't see a future in which this space gets major traction in the real world and is not private at the same time, because governments won't want this, individual users won't want this. So I think this is something that a lot of people have really underestimated, but privacy is going to be the linchpin that decides whether the space gets any major traction or not.
Yeah, very interesting, Adrian. And so, your kind of, I suppose, interest in people's right to privacy, this idea of what we call surveillance capitalism, and I suppose just, people's right to be self-sovereign, self-sovereign individual, but in a contemporary or futuristic digital setting. Are these kind of things that you've been interested in prior to blockchain, or has it all kind of risen up at the same time for you?
No, I've always been very interested in privacy. I mean, I'm from Germany originally, and Germans have this love for cash that I sort of didn't understand when I was a kid. But in the end, it comes down to the fact that the Stasi, so the East German secret police, operated in like the majority of Germany into like the 80s or 90s. And people really remember what it does if you have like very stringent surveillance. And I think this is why I've always had an affinity towards privacy preserving tech, because I think it's the right thing to do. Like when I spend money, no company in the US should be mining my data and selling it to advertisers for like slightly better puppy ads. Like we always have this example of puppy ads, right? That like, oh, this is like the worst thing that happens is you get cute ads. But that's not really the case. It's like the best case scenario. The worst case scenario is that you leak a bunch of your data when you interact with the financial system, and it results in adversaries being able to put you into filter bubbles so that like you live in your own little filter bubble on Twitter or on Facebook. But this is a direct result of everyone individually leaving a lot of data behind, because it allows large scale entities to put you into filter bubbles because they can sort of micro target you. If we lived in a world where we didn't leak all this data, we wouldn't have the problem of slowly eroding democracy via Twitter and Facebook, because these companies couldn't put you into tiny filter bubbles anymore because they wouldn't have the data to micro target you. And so I think, yeah, we should really like for the future survival of humanity, we should really be thinking on how do we prevent people from aggregating lots of data, because it's not the cute puppy pictures that are the problem. It's like the filter bubbles that result from this.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. And so then with Anoma then, Adrian, if the kind of the tagline, if you like, that I think I mentioned in the intro, so Anoma is a protocol that enables private asset agnostic cash and private bartering. So that's quite cool. I like that as a tagline, something a bit different. So please unpack that. What does that mean?
Yeah, actually, I'll start by this is one of the earliest taglines we've used. I think the more accurate tagline that we discovered through the journey of building Anoma is actually that Anoma is a set of protocols and mechanisms for privacy preserving, self-contained, self-sovereign coordination. Because privacy is just a feature of it. It's not built into the base layer protocol in the same sense as it is in like Monero or Zcash. Privacy is sort of something that we've thought very deeply about and that we're enabling on top of Anoma. But at the heart of Anoma, it's really about allowing people to discover counterparties with whom to coordinate. This could be if this is as simple as I want to sort of make a purchase. Now I'm finding like I'm doing counterparty interaction, right? Like I'm paying you some money, and this is where the private cash comes from. We want to enable that I can pay someone privately. But this kind of goes further where, let's say I only have like USDC and the merchant only wants to accept USDT. Now I want to pay privately, but also automatically exchange my USDC into USDT. And Anoma enables all of this. Anoma also enables things like multi-way bartering, because we constructed the platform to be, the protocol to be as general as possible. So you can even do things where I have 2 blue CryptoKitties and I want to swap them against like 2 blue CryptoPunks. But maybe there are only 2 people in the world that, like 2 independent people that hold CryptoPunks. And so we can do a 3-way settle where I issue my intent that I'm interested in CryptoPunks and I'm willing to like sell CryptoKitties for it. And then 2 individual parties each want to individually sell their CryptoPunk. And we can take these 3 intents, or the protocol, like a role on top of the protocol can look at these 3 intents, something called a solver, and go, these three intents are combinable and composable and can be settled on chain. This is really, Anoma is by far the most flexible base layer coordination protocol that I think you can build, at least for now.
And it uses zero knowledge proofs. Is that the case, Adrian?
Yes. So for a lot of the privacy features, this became very apparent in like 2020 that zero knowledge proofs were going to be the best solution for a bunch of privacy preserving stuff. So there are a bunch of circuits under the hood, and people can deploy their own circuits as well. So for example, for the multi-asset private cache, there we have a circuit called the MASP, the multi-asset shielded pool, which gives you sort of similar to Zcash. It gives you the ability to have a single shielded pool, but for all kinds of assets. So that your USDT and your DAI and your ETH and like your native Anoma token and your CryptoKitties, they can all live in the same shielded pool. And as an external observer, I can't tell whether you're sending like a friend some DAI or some USDT or you're selling your CryptoKitty. This is all opaque in the same shielded pool, which is, I think, going to be the first shielded pool that like provides the best in class privacy for non-fungible assets, as well as provides like really great privacy for sort of long tail assets that may not see a lot of use, because your like CryptoKitty transaction gets hidden in all the daily coffee payments in USDC.
And can the same kind of privacy benefits, can this be ported over to various other different chains as well in the same manner, Adrian?
Yes. So in a sense, we are fundamentally in the camp of the multi-asset, the multi-chain world. I think it's very, very unlikely that there will be a single chain to rule them all. So I don't get the single chain thesis. As a result,
the internet of blockchains, Adrian.
Exactly. Yes, absolutely. I think we will see many, probably like hundreds in the next couple of years, probably thousands over the next 20 years chains that all interconnect. So the way to get privacy for like ETH is to use a trustless two-way bridge, move some ETH into Anoma, make it private there, send it around, maybe pay someone for coffee with it. I don't know. That's up to the users really. And then you can always withdraw it back to Ethereum. But I think the important thing here to understand is that this isn't using these like very janky bridges like Wormhole. This is using IBC. So it's like an actual two-way trustless bridge that isn't run by like a cabal of like 9 out of 15 signers have to sign off on these transactions. And I think, by the way, this is going to be the model for most blockchains. I think all modern blockchains will just connect to each other. So like Near to Ethereum, Ethereum, Polkadot to Ethereum, Polkadot to Near, and so on. And I think practically speaking, the most likely outcome is that they all use IBC, because IBC just doesn't know what a token is. It's just a protocol to encode how blockchains can like encode data to each other.
Yeah, that makes sense, Adrian. And it kind of feels like, you know, there's a little bit of tension, I think, between the idea of blockchains as public ledgers where everyone's address and transaction history is completely open and transparent, and you know there's maybe a little bit of privacy if no one is able to connect your real world identity to any single transaction or wallet address, but once they can, then yeah, it's kind of game over. But that's part of the fun as well. So you do have and there's positives as well, because you can verify that a certain transaction or state is real and verifiable, and that is obviously very positive. But at the same time, I think as you kind of explained, Adrian, it is kind of weird that, you know, you can just look literally into a blockchain address or wallet, if you like, and see what is lurking in there, and who, you know, what this particular person, if you know who they are, who they've been sending money to, who's been giving them money. It's a strange dichotomy. What do you think?
Yeah, I think there are a couple of points to this. One, the sort of the individual security guarantees. that you get with blockchains are significantly worse than what you get sort of with the existing financial system. Because in the existing financial system, at least you're private to the world, if not your bank or your government, right? Like generally, if I'm using my bank account, I know that my neighbors can't see it. I probably can expect my bank to be able to see it, and I probably can expect law enforcement to get some sort of access to this data, right? But I can be ensured that not everyone in the world can get this data. So like blockchains currently offers like significantly worse privacy guarantees than the existing financial system. And I think the other thing to keep in mind is that we look at these addresses, these hex encoded addresses, as like pseudonymous. They're not. As in, if you have like not even the resource of a nation state. I mean, like Chainalysis can pretty much identify everyone based on just on-chain activity. Like pseudonymous addresses do not guarantee you any sort of privacy. And the worst part is, it's not only that I can like get your historic data or your current data, I can also get all future data. Because like once I know which cluster of addresses you're linked to, I can see all future moves that you're making. And it's very, very difficult to regain this privacy once you've lost it. So like people should really think about this. Like for instance, like if I could give a recommendation to criminals, I would say to never use blockchains. The existing financial system is way better for you because it provides you much stronger privacy guarantees. And like also to individual users, like I would not recommend my parents to use blockchains to pay people, because like you're just opening yourself up to tons of attacks where if I'm sort of a nefarious person, I can figure out your net worth and start bribing or extorting you based on this. I think on the other hand, like the fact that you can have public verifiability, that's amazing. But the important thing to note here is that with zero knowledge proofs, you keep the public verifiability without leaking the data. So we can get the best of both worlds, where it's like publicly verifiable what is happening and that no one is printing, for example, arbitrary amounts of money, while at the same time maintaining privacy guarantees.
Yeah, okay, that's very well said, Adrian. So what would you say, I'm interested then, like to, if someone was, I mean, obviously it's kind of, I don't want to say it's a cliche at this point, but it kind of is in terms of, yeah, that criminal activity. Even the dumbest criminals probably have a little bit of an inkling now that, you know, the blockchain is not necessarily the smartest way to conduct their nefarious activities. That's reasonably common knowledge today. But what would you say then to someone who is just perhaps starting out in I don't know, crypto or DeFi or NFTs even, but they're very conscious of, let's just call it their digital footprint in general, but that's a coverall for everything, including obviously their financial dealings. You know, what would be their best approach to kind of start now and kind of mid 2022 with a view to remaining, financially private into the future?
Yeah, there are no good options at the moment. It's really about picking your poison. So it's all about data segregation, as in don't reuse addresses, don't like send between your addresses, always use an exchange as effectively a privacy preserving tool. So because like exchanges actually provide pretty decent privacy because you can withdraw addresses from exchanges that aren't linkable to existing addresses. So like pick your poison, pick your exchange that you kind of trust, and use them as your privacy shield, knowing full well that exchange can like expose your entire financial history in the past, in the current state, and going forward into the future. I honestly think there are starting to be tools that make this a lot easier. So you're starting to see on Ethereum a little bit here with Tornado Cash, with Aztec Money or ZK Money. A lot of these things are sort of like, it's starting to come. And I think what we're building is also starting to come. I think like what Zcash has built in the past is amazing. The problem is with Zcash, it's like you have to buy into the ZEC as a monetary policy. But I think it's coming, like keep your eye out. I mean, we're launching just the multi-asset shield pool on a public L1 blockchain called Namada to just give you interoperable private digital cash for all your assets. And that's probably coming out later this year. So like the tools are starting to appear, but they're still early on, and it's like, they're going to be rough edges, but it's starting to happen. And I think 2022, 2023, 2024 are really going to be the years where we see a major push in zero knowledge proof deployment for like end user privacy guarantees.
Nice, Adrian. Tell me, where are you guys in terms of, I suppose, the roadmap? Just love to get a sense of where the protocol development sits, kind of any sort of metrics that you're watching in terms of user growth and all that kind of stuff. Because I can see you've got a pretty good lineup of backers, investors, if you like. You've got Coinbase Ventures, Polychain Capital, a bunch of others that I'm less familiar with, but yeah, some good backers, it seems, Adrian.
Yeah, no, a big shout out to them. I think initially they funded something that most people thought was absolutely crazy. But I think this thesis is starting to play out generally in the market, that privacy preserving tech is actually going to be very, very important going forward. In terms of roadmap, so like, as I said, Anoma is a set of protocols and mechanisms. It's not a single protocol that is sort of the Anoma protocol. There are many protocols that make up the Anoma ecosystem. And so we are now at this point where some of these protocols are starting to be ready, and we're pulling them out into individual products that sort of can be used. And I think the very first one later this year is going to be called Namada, or it's going to be called Namada. I know it's namada.net. That just pulls out the multi-asset privacy part and puts this on an interoperable, interconnected blockchain that people can use to like make their crypto punks private, or their crypto kitties private, or their DAI, or probably eventually also the NEAR, the DOT. So this is coming later this year, which is, I think, going to be the very first privacy preserving protocol that we're releasing. I think mainnet Anoma is probably still like a year out, so it's probably coming somewhere in like mid 2023. There may also be other protocols that we pull out independently to this. So we're working on a private bartering circuit, or sort of a private computational circuit called Tiger. That's also getting close, so that's maybe coming out early 2023. We're also working on a new consensus algorithm called Typhon, which is sort of the extension of Tendermint and interoperability, that you can have on-demand sharding, as like two blockchains can come together and decide that they want to be sharded for, let's say, the next hour or so, and then you have a sharded system, and then they can split up again, and then the two blockchains can continue independently. That's probably coming out mid 2023. Yeah, but so that like as the protocols become ready, we're starting to release them or upgrade them into existing systems. So there's lots of things coming up.
Lots coming up, Adrian. And I mean, if we take it back to the privacy thing, then, you know, I guess you'll be all too familiar that, you know, to some extent, all markets run on narratives, right? And crypto especially loves a narrative. You know, we did have, I think the last time there was a really strong privacy narrative, might even be as far back as 2017, you know, maybe back when Monero and Zcash were, if not in the top 20, perhaps even in the top 10. Certainly Monero, Zcash not too far behind. Both those coins have obviously slipped significantly down the market cap table, as I guess the hot money is, you know, chasing everything from, you know, DeFi and various Ethereum competitors and so on. Is kind of where the investors have gone, and there's much less conversation happening around private transactions. And yeah, I mean, does that worry you? Because I completely agree with kind of all the points you've made today, that there's just not a big galvanizing discussion around it in the way that there used to be.
Not at all, actually. I think especially Zcash was absolutely a pioneer. But for better or for worse, I think they were too early. But without them, we wouldn't be here. So it's a very strange, like, I love Zcash, but I also understand why it didn't get a lot of traction in the market, right? Because ZEC necessarily isn't a super attractive monetary policy. I want to have privacy for arbitrary assets. I want to have privacy for assets that I care about. Like I care about DAI, I care about USDC, I care about ETH. And so it's really figuring out how do we build privacy preserving tech that is asset agnostic. And that was traditionally very hard because sort of like what Zcash did in 2017 was super early and super clunky. I remember the times when you like to construct a single private transaction needed like 8 gigs of RAM, a Linux box, and about 10 minutes of time to construct the proof, right? This has gotten exponentially better. And you're starting to see this, you started to see this also in 2021, where a lot more people are starting to care about privacy. And because the tech is so much better, this can like now be shipped on consumer grade hardware. So like your iPhone can construct a zero knowledge proof for pretty much most modern circuits, which means that the ability to do private asset agnostic payments on people's phones is at this point a matter of engineering and UX and deployment rather than a matter of whether this is technically possible. And so I think, especially if we're starting to think on like, are governments going to issue CBDCs and so on, I think this privacy narrative is just going to be very, very important, because I think to get to the next sort of 200 million people, we need to give them intuitive guarantees about what these systems do, because people have a very intuitive understanding of how the financial system currently works. Like they're missing some finer points. It's like around surveillance capitalism, but they have an idea that like they're not exposing their financial data to the neighbors. And currently this intuition doesn't match the reality in the blockchain space. But this is changing. And I think we have to be building the tech that makes sure that the intuition people have when using financial systems matches the underlying reality. So I'm not worried about this at all. So if you can see this wave picking up steam, and I think everyone is starting to realize that DeFi is like, I mean, there are like some interesting things, but most of DeFi is absolute utter garbage. And I think investors, like the community is realizing this. And it's like, now we have to look for like actual things that solve real people's problems. And like yet another yield farming thing is not it.
No, look, I'm glad you said that, Adrian, and not me. Having said that, I could not agree with you more. Yeah, and I think events of the last 2 weeks have certainly demonstrated that in quite visceral fashion. But Adrian, you mentioned CBDCs, which I think is very pertinent to the discussion as well. So, I mean, you'll have a much more informed view on the I don't know what you call it, the risk benefit equation, shall we say, of CBDCs, how it relates to everything from kind of, I guess, ease of use, easy digital money, sounds good, but yeah, what the possible trade-offs are, and obviously every country kind of has a different view, but man, the dystopian angles are dystopian indeed. So look, give us your spiel. I'm fascinated.
Yeah, so it really depends how you define CBDCs. I mean, in like 2018, 2019, everyone tried to pitch central governments to like issue their coin, their native currency, right, the fiat currency, onto some public blockchain. And I think it didn't work for obvious reasons, which is like no government is going to give up its monetary sovereignty to Ethereum or to any other blockchain. Like I think assuming that like the US government or the Swiss government, because I'm currently based here, will issue like the Swiss franc or the US dollar on a public blockchain, that's incredibly unlikely to happen. So I think what the real angle is, how we can make CBDCs really, really valuable, is if we can convince governments to issue these assets or these tokens, coins, on their own blockchain, right? Imagine that like all banks that form, like all federal banks in the States run a proof of authority blockchain. And that proof of authority blockchain can mint US dollars that are equivalent to like physical fiat. But no transactions actually happen on that chain. This is sort of the public ledger of all USD in existence, but then this ledger is interoperable. And so you can have a connection between like the CHF blockchain and Ethereum, and the Swiss blockchain and Anoma, and the Swiss blockchain and NEAR. And you can issue and redeem against physical CHF on that blockchain. But most transactions, most consumer grade transactions never happen on that blockchain. So you can move like a digital CHF into Ethereum and use this digital CHF, which is equivalent to physical CHF, always redeemable, doesn't have a counterparty risk except the Swiss government, in Ethereum DeFi or in like a private transaction on Anoma. I think this is the real solution that we should be going for, because it sort of strikes the balance between governments want monetary sovereignty, which I understand, and the public wants privacy. And the big thing is the government is not capable of developing or deploying systems that settle all USD transactions. Like believing that the government can deploy a blockchain that views everyone's accounts and also is stable at all times and can settle everyone's trades is like overestimating the capabilities of pretty much every major government by sort of an order or two of magnitude. So I think sort of the thing we should be aiming for is that central governments start issuing their own currencies on their own blockchains and to make these blockchains interoperable with the rest of the ecosystem. And all of a sudden we can get all the nice features of having digital cash that's like backed by a government, but we can use this in an Ethereum DeFi contract on a private payment on Anoma or a private trade on Anoma. This is, I think, the model we should be going for.
Very nice, Adrian. All right. Well, look, just as we start to finish off this part of the podcast, just because, you know, I think you're a reasonably technical guy, you're a protocol engineer, I think. So, you know, be fascinated to get your thoughts on. I saw that because interested that you think, you know, DeFi is a little bit of a, I don't know, can't remember how exactly.
Ponzi scheme.
There you go. Thank you. And obviously, you know, we've seen what happened with Luna and UST in the last 2 weeks. I just saw that, and obviously a big topic of discussion is and has been Ethereum's move to proof of stake. But I saw, I think it was Joe Lieben was on Bloomberg earlier today being grilled about, you know, what the likelihood is of a similar kind of an attack vector, if you like, targeting Ethereum once it moves to proof of stake. So I know there's, you know, lots of different ways you can approach this, but, you know, you're obviously a proof of stake guy. So how would you respond to that?
Yeah, okay, let me start with this. I remember when Terra started in like 2018, I guess, because they actually built on the Cosmos SDK, which I'd worked on quite a bit. So like we read the white paper like 2018, and like within like a week, it was clear that this was going to happen. Like Luna's collapse is not like surprising. It's surprising on how long it took. But this collapse is fundamentally part of the protocol design, as in was designed to happen. And this has nothing to do with the proof of stake implementation. This has everything to do with the algorithmic stablecoin and the death spiral. Like Terra's or Luna's collapse means nothing for the viability of proof of stake. Like there's no connection. It is just that don't tie an algorithmic stablecoin, and you shouldn't be using algorithmic stablecoins anyway, because all algorithmic stablecoins have the same problem as Luna, to like the proof of stake security model. If you really want to like build a Ponzi scheme that eventually blows up in people's faces, which is fine. Like this was all public open source code, and people should know this and read the specifications underlying this. But if you do this, tie this to another token, not your proof of stake security token. This is sort of my biggest recommendation. So this is not something it's not a general class of problems for proof of stake. It is a very specific class of problems for algorithmic stablecoins. And the only reason why it affected the security of Terra was because the algorithmic stablecoin was tied to the underlying staking asset. Like proof of stake is fine.
Well, okay. Well, I'm going to push you just slightly further, Adrian. So I completely understand that. Sorry, and that was probably my mistake. I didn't mean to compare what a future attack scenario on Ethereum as related to what happened with Luna, because I understand that algorithmic stablecoins are, fascinating, exotic, even wonderful experiments, but they are just that. They're experimental, and no one knows how to make them work yet. But, I'll play devil's advocate. Bitcoin maximalists would say kind of the same thing about proof of stake, right? They would say, well, yeah, it's a great, wonderful, exotic experiment in blockchain governance, and it's a cool, new, exciting consensus mechanism, but it is not battle tested or proven at scale.
I totally get this. I would also say that we should be experimenting with underlying security models, and the big thing is don't hyperinflate your underlying security model. This is like a bad idea if you have some automatic mechanism in protocol that prints a lot of your native asset in order to stabilize some other thing. I think also proof of stake is probably not the end all be all. I can absolutely see a future where in a couple of years we start moving away from proof of stake and more towards proof of identity systems, or a combination between proof of identity and proof of stake, where it's not a purely capitalist system, but we also have if we have a unique understanding of what an identity is, and we know that someone's identity is unique in the system, we can start doing like quadratic proof of identity, proof of stake systems, where every validator can at most accumulate that much stake based on how many people are backing it, like how many real people are backing that validator. So I think we should continue experimenting with security models. I would push back though that the assumption that proof of work is always as secure as Bitcoin maximalist claims are probably wrong, because it depends. Like, you just outsource your security model to sort of very cheap electricity. And that may not always hold either. Like, I'm not completely convinced that proof of work can withstand like coordinated government action either. And there are lots of benefits to proof of stake and to modern consensus mechanisms as a whole, because you can have things like fast finality light clients, which you can't have for proof of work. You can't even have a slow light client for proof of work. You can't have a light client that has finality. You can't have finality for proof of work. And so like all these things are just things that are massive benefits of proof of stake and like modern BFT, and we shouldn't discount them. I think we should, as an industry, get away from this like everyone against everyone else. I think there's absolutely space for a couple of proof of work chains. I think we should keep them going. They're amazing global stable clocks. I don't know whether they make the best currencies. I think we should have a bunch of proof of stake chains. We should have a bunch of L2s. We should have a bunch of Lightning payment channels. We should mostly focus on growing the pie rather than fighting over who gets which slice of a sort of constant size pie.
Yeah, I think that's very, very nicely said, Adrian. Let's all grow the pie together and build this internet of blockchains. It is a nice thought, of course. The real world is volatile and adversarial, and all blockchains need to be designed in that context. We'll go to a break, Adrian, and then we'll come back and we'll finish off. We'll have some fun. We'll run you through the very famous Crypto Conversation hot take round. Just before we do that, just because we've been going a little bit already, let's just give you the opportunity to tell people, where they should go to learn more about what you guys are building at Anoma. If you've piqued their interest, what should they do? Where should they go?
Yeah, of course. It's very simple, actually. Just go to anoma.net or find us on Twitter at Anoma Network. And if I piqued your interest about asset-agnostic digital private cash, go to namara.net or on Twitter to @Namara Network.
Awesome. All right. Thanks very much, team. We'll be back in 30 seconds.
For crypto indices and benchmarking, Brave New Coin's powerful indexing engine can calculate high-frequency intraday and end-of-day indices for a wide range of index products. Brave New Coin's custom indices team delivers experienced consultancy, premium data, and trusted calculation. Contact BNC today to find out more.
All right, we are back just like that, and we are with Adrian Brink. He is the founder of Anoma. And yeah, really building a whole bunch of protocols to help bring back asset asset-agnostic privacy to the Internet of Blockchains. And well, Adrian, I've already enjoyed talking to you, but what we do at the end of the show here is we run you through the very famous crypto conversation hot take round. Really just going to throw a bunch of quick questions at you, just a bit of fun. No right or wrong way to do this. Just want your honest opinions, hot take style. Right. The question one, the first one is, we've sort of discussed it, but where would you say you sit on the Bitcoin maximalist to multi-chain opportunist spectrum?
Hugely on the multi-chain. Yes. There's almost zero possibility that we have a one-chain rule to rule them all future.
Indeed. All right. What would you say is your firmest conviction, crypto opinion, Adrian?
Privacy matters way more than everyone currently realizes in order to actually make public blockchains work for the world population.
I like it. All right. UBI as a potential fix for AI-induced automation, or increased wealth inequality in this kind of future dystopia that seems to be rushing towards us faster than ever. UBI, is it a good thing or a bad thing?
I think we currently have UBI in most of the Western world. It's called Social Security and Unemployment Benefits. We should just generalize this, and it's absolutely going to happen either way. It's a question of whether we want a very expensive UBI in the form of we have a bureaucracy that decides who gets it and who doesn't, or we just give it by default to everyone, which is probably cheaper. So yes, UBI is absolutely going to happen, and it's inevitable, I think.
You're probably right. Just make up a digital currency, put it on a blockchain, automate it, give it to everyone in the world. WorldCoin, job done, right?
Oh God, no! Don't. WorldCoin is terrifying for a whole bunch of other reasons. It is, but blockchain. I think this is.
Funnily enough, WorldCoin, and I wasn't even meaning WorldCoin. I just kind of plucked that name out of my head. But now, no, you're exactly right. So WorldCoin does exist, and it is kind of what I just described. But it is very, of course, relatable to our discussion, because pick up the story. What do they want to do, and how is that bad for privacy? What could possibly go wrong, Adrian?
Yeah, I don't know. Scanning everyone's irises and hoping that silver orb, terrifying thing that follows you around in sci-fi movies, doesn't keep your data is oh God, I don't know. It just seems like a terrible idea.
It does seem like a terrible idea. All right, so listeners, if you don't know what we're talking about, just look up WorldCoin, dystopia, and iris iScan. Yeah. All right, it sounds like a Black Mirror episode already. Bill Gates famously said, Adrian, that we tend to overestimate what we can accomplish in 2 years and overestimate what we can accomplish in 10. So with that in mind, the Internet of Blockchains, Adrian, what does it all look like in 10 years' time?
In 10 years' time, I think the protocols will coalesce, as in, I think there will be probably hundreds of deployments of the Anoma protocols. And there will be an Anoma blockchain running in Berlin, controlled and operated by people in Berlin, by the local locality. There will be blockchains in SF, in Zurich. There will probably be a European blockchain. There will be a couple of large blockchains that sort of span the globe. I think there will be a mix of proof of work and proof of stake, and everything will just interoperate with each other, and users don't have to be aware of this. I think end user interfaces will be able to abstract which blockchain you're on, and if I'm traveling from Zurich to San Francisco, and my money mostly lies in my Zurich the Zurich blockchain, because this is where I live at the moment, and I'm traveling to SF, I pay a merchant in SF, and I move money from the Zurich chain to the SF chain. I do a private payment over there because the underlying set of Anoma protocols is roughly the same, with the same kind of API. And then the merchant receives, I spend digital CHF, the merchant receives digital USD, or even ETH if you wanted to. I think that's what the future holds. Tons of blockchains that all interoperate.
I like it. All right. Well, similarly, Adrian, sci-fi author William Gibson said that the future is already here, it's just not evenly distributed. Can you think of an example of the future being here right now, but most people just aren't really aware of it?
Yes, the metaverse. The metaverse is a pure marketing buzzword run by like Facebook and a bunch of gaming companies. We already live in the metaverse. Like, we don't need VR goggles or anything, or like a digital represent, like a token on a blockchain. Like, your phone is the metaverse and you're always connected to it. And most of your things already happen in the digital realm. So we're already in the metaverse. And for some reason now Facebook is trying to sell us the idea that no, we're going to go to their metaverse in the future. And it's like, yeah.
I love these. This is why we call it the hot take round, because we get some hot takes. So if that's interesting, Adrian. Then what's your take on NFTs? Are you an NFT guy?
I think they're a very efficient solution to like money laundering. But I don't mean this in the bad way. Like, I mean this in the sense that like most of the art market is money laundering.
Sure.
It's just very inefficient and expensive and slow. And NFTs made this market very, very efficient. Like, NFTs took the physical money laundering market of art and made it digital. That's mostly it, I think. Like,
okay, so what about so we've done Metaverse, we've done NFTs, perhaps somewhere in the middle, but perhaps some slightly more practical to the average person then, Web3 or the creator economy?
That I think is pretty then. It's like, I mean, it's closely tied to NFTs actually. I think one of the nice things about the digital world is that cost of production is relatively low, right? Like, if you produce a physical chair, you have wood, you have time spent on producing that chair. That's a scarce resource. In the digital world, we can get away from a lot of the scarcity and can make like nicest chairs available to everyone at almost no cost. And so at the moment, I think the narrative is a little bit that we want to make all of these chairs very scarce and charge money for it. What I think is really going to happen though is that like unique content that requires actual human input is going to be at premium. Like, think of like well-written Twitter threads, Substack newsletters, podcasts even. I think a lot of this is going to be covered in the sort of creator economy. And I can see where like a revenue model that can evolve around NFTs to access to this kind of content. But I have a hard time seeing how we shouldn't be charging for like the same copy of the same boring chair, even if it's 10 cents, like it's free.
Yeah, it worries me slightly though that AI produced content. I think AI, even those GPT-3, whatever it is, that language processor, they'll be able to write very, very good Twitter threads on any given subject, if not now, very, very soon. And like, deep fakes, AI, give an AI a deep fake piece of software and boom, they can create any kind of YouTube or podcast content, really, right?
Absolutely. And that's actually not the scary part. The scary part is that you can ask these GPT-3 models, like, give me 10 research papers that climate change is real. And then they will give you 10 research papers that climate change is clearly real, backed by real like references. So like they're almost indistinguishable. It takes a reviewer a couple of hours to figure out whether this is actual bullshit or not. But you can also ask the model, give me 10 research papers that climate change is not real. And you get the same result. Like almost indistinguishable like research papers that like argue for completely the opposite side of the coin. So I think this is actually where also like with Anoma, one thing we're trying to do is like allowing like human coordination on a one-to-one level to like get rid of this, like that you're talking to real people that like have real stakes in these systems. To some extent to like start saving democracy, because all of these like GPT-3 models are going to very quickly erode democracy as we know it, because it can just like create filter bubbles for people. Like we should be really worried about leaking data, because the problem with leaking data for everyone is like not individually giving up privacy, but as a whole, we're like helping the erosion of democracy at an astonishing pace, because all of this data gets fit into models that will destroy us.
All right, and as we start to close it out, Adrian, time to zoom out. I'm sure you'll enjoy this one. What do you see as the long-term future of the human race? Do you see dystopia or utopia?
I think I'm actually a lot less pessimistic than most people. I think, especially on the front of surveillance capitalism, truth on the internet, or truth in the digital space, we are at a point where we have the sort of technical capabilities to prevent a lot of these dystopias from happening. I'm thinking specifically here on like decentralized blockchain tech, privacy tech using zero-knowledge proofs, fully homomorphic encryption. All these kinds of things are like our tool set to prevent dystopias from happening is growing larger at an exponential rate too. It's just a matter whether the public will care and whether we spend enough time trying to deploy these systems. So I think I'm slightly optimistic that we can probably prevent a lot of these dystopias. But yeah, they are there, and we should all be worried about it and like work on useful things, not yet another DeFi Ponzi, because that clearly doesn't prevent the dystopias from happening.
Yeah, very much so. All right. Finally, Adrian, what is your favorite science fiction? A book, a film, a TV show, or universe?
Neil Stephenson, because they predicted Bitcoin.
Yeah, no, that's...
what's the book title called again?
Snow Crash.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Absolutely. They predicted Bitcoin. I love it.
All right. Hey, this was good, Adrian. Really enjoyed talking to you about
I'm glad.
privacy, Anoma, all that good stuff. So again, please tell the people where they can go to find yourself wherever you like to hang out on the internet, maybe Twitter, and again, please, the various Anoma websites and so on.
Yeah, absolutely. You can find me on Twitter at @Adrian_Brink. And you can find everything about Anoma at anoma.net or at Anoma Network on Twitter. And if you're interested in trying to build privacy-preserving tech for self-contained, self-sovereign coordination, let me know, hit me up. We're always looking for people. We're growing relatively quickly at the moment, so always looking for like-minded people.
Awesome. This was fun. Hey, thank you very much, Adrian. All the best, and bye for now.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
All right, there you go. That was Adrian from Anoma. Took us a while to get warmed up, but I enjoyed talking to Adrian. He was good. Fascinating character. Very perceptive. Some good insights there, particularly on DeFi. So Anoma. I wasn't really familiar with Anoma before talking to Adrian, but yes, quite intrigued now. Looks good, and I think he's right. We do obviously need very big need for not necessarily shielded transactions, but the ability to be private when you want to be private on a blockchain. It just makes sense, and I think that narrative will come back to the fore. Anyway, all right, well, that's today's show, team. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to subscribe to the Crypto Conversation so when each new episode drops. Got a couple of big episodes coming real soon, so do stick around. But that's today's show. This was the Crypto Conversation for Brave New Coin.